Foreign travel, whether for business or pleasure, has become an integral part of the modern global economy, but, no matter how prevalent it may be, there are always specific protocols to follow while crossing foreign borders. The United States Department of State advises travelers to double-check their COVID-19 insurance, make note of the various emergency services numbers, and bring their passports when visiting Canada. The U.S. Department of State advises travelers going to Somalia not to bring valuables with them, to create a proof of life procedure, to name an estate executor and a point of contact in case of kidnapping, and to leave behind a will. Welcome to the Financial Fortune YouTube channel, your trusted destination for insightful discussions on global economies and their intricate dynamics. In today's video, we turn our focus to a nation that has faced exceptional challenges on the economic front, Somalia. Often labeled as one of the world's most dangerous economies, Somalia's economic landscape is shaped by unique circumstances and complex factors. Join us as we delve into the depths of Somalia's economic struggles, uncovering the root causes, consequences, and potential pathways for change. Prepare to gain a comprehensive understanding of why Somalia's economic challenges make it stand out on the global stage. Because of the high risk of being attacked by criminals, civilians, and armed militias, the United States relocated its embassy from Mogadishu, the country's capital, to Kenya in 1991. Since then, a modest diplomatic fortress has reopened, but most activities continue beyond the border. In economics, the goal is to maximize happiness while making do with what you have. What the Somalian economy looks like when the world's greatest and most powerful military has trouble establishing permanent operations. There is a terrible but intriguing case study. Somalia was an area of anarchy with no internationally recognized governments or institutions for over a decade. Amazingly, many experts concurred that the economic conditions in Somalia during the anarchy that followed the collapse of the state were better than those that were under state authority. This is because the purge is more successful at economic coordination than the government. It's very evident that many things have gone wrong, and that, in the main, the situation has not improved. The economy is extremely weak, with the typical citizen contributing slightly more than $1 to the economy per day. Even though the country currently has a government that is officially recognized, its borders are full of contested territories and areas under the control of self-declared governments and military groups. What kinds of businesses might one expect to find in such a dispersed economy? Is there any plausible possibility for Somalia to reverse its current fortunes? Finally, what can the rest of the world learn from a nation that has been forced to adopt such a radical economic system? After it is finished, Somalia will be back where it belongs on the National Economics Explained ranking. The present government of Somalia controls the southern part of the nation, while the northern separatist Somali region claims de facto independence. No other country or international institution, including the United Nations, the International Monetary Fund, or the World Bank, recognizes them as a nation at this time. However, Somaliland has outside representation in places like Australia and Canada in addition to the United States. Even though they aren't recognized as embassies, they perform similarly. Will the foreign investors' control of the port or factory, built to take advantage of Somalia's cheap labor force, be acknowledged by the other factions in the country? Even more so than with financial investments, providing humanitarian services is challenging since it requires understanding which groups to partner with in different regions of the country and being extremely careful that they don't siphon off the aid for their own purposes. Because of its strategic location at the entrance of the Suez Canal, the Soviet Union supported an increasingly authoritarian regime in Egypt until it collapsed in 1991. We use this qualifier because, well, even back then there were factions wanting to break away from or overthrow the government, so it's kind of accurate. When the Soviet Union disintegrated, the government lost its financial backing, and civil conflict broke out rapidly. As a result, millions of people were put in danger of starvation as those who relied on subsistence farming were driven off their land. The UND participated in humanitarian efforts, but had to withdraw their forces when the warring groups began targeting them for their food supplies. This led to US-led operations across the nation, such as the Black Hawk Down incident and the failed Battle of Mogadishu. There are several simple manufacturing sectors in Somalia that don't call for extensive government support or infrastructure. government control over, say, the sale of crops at a local market is unlikely to be particularly helpful, and unscrupulous government officials wanting to collect their portion of bribes or extortion money can make matters much worse. However, government funding will be useful for a project like creating new computer technologies. To get their goods to customers all over the world, the companies in charge of these sectors will require transportation infrastructure like roads and ports, as well as legal and physical security to prevent the theft of their technologies and the looting of their facilities. Of course, the total absence of regulation has also enabled the growth of other industries, most notably the one most people think of when they hear the word piracy, in relation to Somalia. For some time, even when accounting for gross output, Somalia was one of the few countries whose very existence constituted a net cost to the world economy. Extra insurance, naval operations, and shipping routes farther from the coast were expected to cost the global economy between $12 and $18 billion per year during the height of piracy off the coast of Somalia. At the time, Somalia's GDP was barely about $4 billion. While the piracy itself is an interesting case study in market economics, the difference is sometimes cited as an ideal illustration of the importance of foreign aid. It's reasonable to wonder if it's the wisest use of tax resources to fund international humanitarian aid and infrastructure development with budgets in the billions of dollars. Building a better world and reducing human suffering are two of many arguments in favor of international aid. That extra $18 billion in annual global shipping costs will be passed on to consumers regardless, but even if we view it through the lens of a heartless economist who only wants to know what's in it for them, foreign aid can be a really good investment because it can eliminate indirect costs like this. The good news is that these kinds of expenditures may often be entirely avoided by making modest investments in domestic production or government services like law enforcement. One of the purest instances of free market dynamics with almost no interference from a government is when piracy and Somalia were at their peak. While the Somali pirate raids may have appeared cheap at first glance, they really needed sophisticated equipment like weapons and radar, as well as fast boats capable of keeping up with large container ships. Those were extremely valuable possessions in a country where the annual GDP per person was barely $400. To facilitate this profitable trade, the country's citizens formed an unofficial stock market for pirate raids, where they could pool their resources to purchase vessels and equipment and split the proceeds after a successful ransom. This is fascinating for economists not just because of the wild anarchy of a market for piracy, but also because investment markets are typically thought to require a great deal of regulation. Investors in a pirate raid could have trouble getting their hands on their part of the loot if the band of armed bandits decides to hoard the loot for themselves. But in this nation where there is no government, citizens have banded together to ensure the market is safe and secure enough to support a multi-billion-dollar sector for over a decade. Until you realize that much of the money was gained by holding innocent people as hostages, it's almost comforting. Somalia's economy has been expanding since the new government took power, and it is becoming less reliant on illegal activities like piracy as a result. It has slowed from a relatively high base, and the majority of the population is still quite poor. But things are becoming better all throughout Mogadishu, the country's capital. For the past 3 decades, this city has been riddled with bombed-out buildings left over from conflicts. However, in order to accommodate the ex-Somali residents who fled the country and are now returning, posh new apartment buildings and shopping centers have been constructed. As a result, the country's still struggling economy now faces a surprisingly sophisticated challenge. The property market is out of reach for most people. Using the most up-to-date information we have, Mogadishu has higher housing costs than Austin, Texas. Note that it is extremely challenging to collect trustworthy statistics in Mogadishu. Their economy is almost totally informal, and economists are unlikely to risk kidnapping while doing primary research there. Supply is a factor in the housing crisis. Modern home development in the country just began seriously during the past 5 to 10 years, and in that period, building materials have skyrocketed in price. General products and services are another important expense. It's difficult to keep stores stocked with food and other goods when transportation costs are high due to a lack of built infrastructure like roads and ports. The electricity supply is also a major issue. Electricity is unstable and expensive since the government hasn't had time to build out new power plants and transmission systems. As we wrap up this eye-opening video, we are left with profound questions about the future of Somalia's economy. How can the country overcome its turbulent history and create a more stable and prosperous economic future? What role can international cooperation, development initiatives, and local innovation play in steering Somalia toward economic recovery? The case of Somalia serves as a testament to the resilience of nations facing extreme challenges. Stay tuned to the Financial Fortune channel for more enlightening discussions on global economies and their impact on our interconnected world. Remember, understanding the complexities of diverse economies broadens our perspective and empowers us to work towards positive change. Until next time, may we all strive for a world where economic opportunities are accessible to all, regardless of the challenges they face.